Okay, welcome to the explanation of the summary of evidence, the second part of the historical investigation. I know that the screen might be a little bit crooked, but the information is totally legitimate, so don't worry about that. Now, as we can see, the summary of evidence is worth 6 points. It's a big section, 6 out of the total 25 points. There's only one other section which is worth 6 points, and that's the analysis. And the summary of evidence is a lot easier than the analysis. So it's very important that students score high in the summary of evidence section because it's a big chunk of points that's relatively easy to get. So it's kind of similar to the plan of investigation in that I would expect a lot of high scores. Really no one less than a 3 out of 6, and most students probably getting a 4, and even a good chunk, maybe up to a third of students getting a 5 or 6. So the purpose here is to break this down in order to understand what there needs to be, and then look at a very weak sample, and then I've kind of got a middle sample also. So we'll get the explanation of the elements, then the demonstration of the models, and then you can watch this as many times as you want, maybe alone in your house if you're sad one day and you're thinking, what can I do to be happy and feel rainbows and butterflies and Teletubbies and rainbows and unicorns? You can watch this again. So here we go. The summary of evidence, 6 points. The first thing is that everything in the summary of evidence should only be facts. They should be relevant facts to the question, like it says there, facts only. So what that means is, for example, if your question is, how did Fidel Castro's attack on the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba contribute to his revolutionary movement, you should not be including facts that are irrelevant to that, such as biographical information on Fidel Castro, where he was born, who his father was, the occupations of his father and his mother, and even like his role in university and his really becoming a revolutionary. None of that information has anything to do with the attack on the Moncada barracks contributing to the creation of his revolutionary movement. So all the facts need to be highly relevant to the question. The second feature is that everything should be tightly and correctly organized. There's 2 options for organization. The first option is you can organize by theme. If you have a plan of investigation that established categories of information that will be investigated in order to unveil the answer to your question, then perhaps in the summary of evidence section, those different themes could be the categories that you previously named. If, however, you don't want to go by themes, you can go by time, which would be a chronological organization of the facts. So you can kind of choose. Typically, students are more comfortable with doing the chronological organization, but again, like I said, if you've established those themes, those categories in the previous section in the plan of investigation, this would be the time to organize your information by category. And the last one is all of your information should be correctly cited and there should be many sources. The IB rubric calls for the investigation to be well researched, and demonstration of high degrees of research will be made evident through the wide number of sources that are consulted and that are referenced correctly. Okay? So this is kind of what we need. So now we're going to go to the weak sample first. Okay? And for the weak sample, I picked, it says there, women in the French Revolution. Now this is really awful because normally the first thing that you'd see is the actual research question itself. This is a really terrible plan of investigation. But if we go down to the next section, the summary of evidence, we can kind of see, maybe I can blow it up a little bit more. We can see that this is just a big narrative. And in fact, it's hard when even looking at it to tell what are the facts and what are the author's own addition to the facts, which would be analysis. You don't want any analysis in this section. You only want facts, just like it said there on the first slide. You only want facts. Here we have just large chunks, paragraphs of information. This should be avoided. You should go with bullet points. You'll see in the next sample how bullet points helps the author, you, keep to portraying only the facts and avoid the insertion of analysis, because that's a different section. That's the 4th section. So, first problem with this is it's in paragraphs. The second problem with this is that there's absolutely no referencing. It just appears to go on and on and on with this very plain historical narrative, like this happened, and 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 this happened. This is like an 8th grade historical research report with no opinion at all. It's just portraying this as if this is the divine truth. There's no argument. There's no. It's awful. This is awful. And what the moderators did when they graded this is, out of the 6 points, they gave it 1. They gave it 1 out of 6. That's something you definitely don't want to do. You don't want to get 1 out of 6 points. And what they said here is that none of the information referred to in the section is referenced. That's right, because there's no MLA citations and there's no footnotes. It's all just a bunch of historical narrative. And automatically, if you have no reference material, your score is going to be a 1 or 2 out of 6. And this information in this specific historical investigation was so awful that it was actually a 1 out of 6. Definitely don't want to do that. So then you might be thinking, what am I to do? What do I do? Well, this is what you do. I don't have a very high sample, but I have a pretty well done sample, and I'm going to show you that one next. It's kind of what I call a middle sample. The question that they investigated was, to what extent did the Norwegian and Allied sabotage of the heavy water plant in Rjukan hinder Hitler acquiring the atomic bomb? So that's the question. Relevant information is only pertaining to that question. And if we go down to the second section, we will find right away, bam, a list of information. This is good. This helps the author stick to the facts. 2, you'll see all the citations. The MLA in-text citation after every single fact. So that's awesome too. Now we do notice, however, that the organization might not be the best. We see that it might be roughly chronologically organized because it starts with 1940, we see 41 here, we see 42, but there's a lot of information that's on here that doesn't seem to have any type of date. And that makes me wonder if chronological organization was really the best choice for this bunch of information. Probably would have been better to go with a thematic approach. If most of your information, if less than half of it has dates, you probably shouldn't choose chronological organization. Another thing that's to be critical of in this summary of evidence is that most of the information comes from only a few sources. This investigation really consulted 2 different texts, one of them called Dahl, another by Kurzman, those being the authors of the text. And this really makes the vast majority of this research, this information, just focus on 2 sources, which is going to be inhibiting it from getting a high score. So what did the moderators say? Well, this is what the moderators said. If we go to the moderators' feedback, we find that it got a 4 out of 6. 4 out of 6 is alright. If you get a 4 out of 6, you know, if you're a perfectionist, you probably won't be happy, but if you're a realist, you can put a smile on that face. So what they said is the evidence is largely based on 2 sources, which prevents it from being classified as well-researched. It is also not clearly organized, although there is some organization. It appears like chronological organization, right? There is relevant information that is referenced. So it's a good example, that sample that I put up here again, this one is a good example of how to reference. I know that referencing is something that students really struggle with. So this is a really good example of how to just lay it out in the bullet points and put the MLA references in text right after it. Usually MLA is easier than footnotes because in English class you use MLA, so you're more familiar with it. Okay? The last thing I'm going to show you is you might be wondering, how do I know how to do these citations? What if I was asleep in English class, mister? It's boring. You know, I teach 10th grade English. Maybe you will have had me. Maybe I didn't teach you appropriately how to do the MLA in-text citation, and you just don't know how to do it. How do you do it? Well, hopefully your history teacher can go over some strategies, which might comically be me, about how to do this. However, if you want to be a really super-duper person and discover the answer on your own, you can just go to Purdue University. Purdue University, pretty prestigious, right? Their website, if you just go to Purdue OWL and you type in MLA format, you're going to find a whole list of how to do every single type of MLA citation and the basic examples of, of how to do it, right? So this is really, really easy. Really easy explanation of how to do it. If you want to do footnotes, that's something that is a little bit more complicated, and I think we're only going to teach in 12th grade, but that's not going to be in this video. That's something that you get individually in 12th grade. I think that concludes everything that I have to say about the summary of evidence. I hope that this helped, and stay tuned for the next section.